So today we're going to talk about how I use my lumber. Whether I use it green, whether I let it dry, and how I stack it, what's the purpose of the reasons I do it, and some examples of when you would and wouldn't use it green. So for most of my building of the cabin, I use mostly green lumber. But there's some drawbacks to it, and we'll talk about those. But generally, after I mill the lumber, I'm always trying to stack it up. Here's a pile of red oak that I've done just recently. As you can see, I keep it up off the ground and I try to keep it straight. Like my metal bunk down there, you can see isn't straight, but I do level it out and straighten it with some dunnage underneath there to get the first board perfectly straight. From there, I'm using stickers and putting gaps in between all of my boards. Now I do this whether I'm milling it and going to use it green or whether I'm going to let it dry. And I'll go through the drying process that I use as well, such as when we get ready to do the hardwood floors. I've been drying some stuff. That way I can make tongue and groove and it doesn't shrink as much. So this pile we did within the last couple weeks, we're going to get it ready to start drying. This is going to be for indoor. Don't want it to shrink as much once I put it up. But here's a pile of stickers that I make. Make them about 32 inches long, which is as wide as I make my piles. And I'll put 4 or 5 of them down through. Usually about every 24 to 32 inches. Now, as we come over to the cabin here, if you remember, about a year ago, I started installing these boards, and I installed them green. I didn't give them a chance to dry, and I expected some shrinkage. So, at this point, 1 year later, these boards have been hanging here, and when I put them together, originally, they were tight, or semi-tight. Now I've got about 3/8 gaps on both sides. This was expected. So my original thought was that I was going to use board and batten and just cover these joints. But I think I'm going to do some lap siding in some areas, change it up, give it a little bit different look, and we'll go from there. Now as you can see, most of my boards that I laid here stayed pretty straight once they were fastened. But occasionally I get one that cups pretty bad, and for that I'll just take a screw and I'll screw it back in a little bit and bend it back. But you can expect that building green. You can see we're on the front here. You can see the gaps aren't quite as bad here. This lumber didn't shrink quite as much. So here's a pile of red oak that I recently cut in the last few weeks. I'm using a moisture meter to check and see how wet it is after about a week or so. As you can see here, it's at like 18.3%, which is very wet, which is expected at this point. So let's go over to some of the stuff that I've dried. Matter of fact, here's a couple of oak beams that I'm going to use to make some siding. And when I check that, it's going to be right around the 18.5% as well. So this pile back here I've been drying for about 6 months. It's been covered, clamped, stickered, and stacked. When we come over to this pile and we use the moisture meter, you're going to see a totally different kind of reading. It's going to be a little bit drier, and I'm going to use my two-pronged moisture meter to show you the same thing here. As I check this piece, and I can't show you because of the sun and the direction I'm facing, it's about 10.3%. So here's another piece. I brought it over so we get a little closer look. It's about 10. If you look at the little gauge, I have it set for hardwood. It's saying this is dry. Anything under 10% is getting to the point where I can start using it. If I kiln dried it, we'd probably get it down to 8 or so. But I'm going to be happy with it to use for the hardwood flooring at that. We'll probably give it a few more weeks. We'll come back and revisit that. I'm thinking later this fall, we'll start making up some hardwood flooring out of this. Tongue and groove. So we can install it over the winter. Now we can see, looking at these boards, I've had these clamped and covered, as I said, for about the last 6 months. And you can see, by clamping them down with some ratchet straps, all these boards, for the most part, haven't cupped. I see one there up towards the top that has a little cup to it, but for the most part, we're fairly straight. And this is what we want to see. So I'll put this metal roofing back on here. We'll get it covered back up and clamped so it can continue its drying process. As you can see, I'm just using an ordinary piece of metal roofing, some ratchet straps to hold everything tight, and keep the drying process going. It's important you don't cover it with tarp or plastic that will hold moisture and create mold growth. You want the air to freely flow through your wood. Generally speaking, most of the cabin builds been with green lumber. But if you need to let it dry, such as the wood floor, so you don't get gaps, this is the way I do it. It takes about a year per inch, they say, to get it down to the proper moisture level. So, thanks for watching, guys. Hope this helps. If you like it, click like, subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll continue our journey. I've got a lot more to show you, a lot more ideas, and I can't wait to share them with you.